Hey everyone, we're back. Random Musings once again. We missed last week, and the reason we missed last week is because my team and I have been working very hard on launching our Top 40 program. For those of you who don't know, we created a program, I invested some capital, we went to the market and said we're looking for 40 entrepreneurs for us to mentor over the next 18 months to the next 5 years, 54 months. And really the drivers, we want to help them grow revenues in their businesses by 3x. So that's 3 multiplied whatever levels of revenue they're achieving now. And we've come a really long way. We received over 4,000 applications. We chose 40. So last week we were launching the top 40, monochrome. The event looked beautiful. I'm really so proud of the team. So that's the reason why we missed the Random Musings last week. Now, I also want to say to those of you that have been sending us messages saying, hey, we love the musings, keep them coming. Thank you very much, Nyabonga. It seems the week before last one that focused on why greed and corruption exists is also very, very popular. Thank you guys. We see you. We appreciate your love. So this week I wanted to share with you, first I've just written an article called Why is South Africa the Next Greece? And in the article my team and I really try to answer whether or not there is anything we as South Africans can learn from the collapse of the Greek economy, and what are the similarities between ourselves and the Greek economy, and most importantly what you and I as citizens can do to try and circumvent that. Now, let me quickly just say, as a person who has studied economics, that if you throw a stone any direction, you'll find 3 pieces of theory, economic theory, using the same level of evidence. So there is no doubt in my mind, at the back of this, someone will find evidence to support that what I'm saying is not true, but I'm just going to make the case for you about why I think we are where we are as a country, why we face the challenges that we face, and most importantly, what we can do about it. You know me, I'm an action guy, so what can we do about it? So what inspired this piece first? So most of you know I come from a small township called Wattville in Benoni. I'm born in '85, and as far as I can remember, my township had around 3 industrial sort of areas, right? So as you drive into Wattville, by the way, is tiny. It's got effectively 3 exits. You can drive from the one end of Wattville to the other end in like 7 minutes. It's a tiny, tiny township. You can walk the whole area in like 30 minutes. It's tiny. But around my township were 3 industrial areas, right? Like massive industrial parks. I remember there was Quicket, which is still there. They make geysers. There was Mintex Dawn, which does adhesives. National Batteries, which makes car batteries. There was Umamamubi's Gem Fix. I don't even know what it's called, but it's like a sweet shop that makes like jam and sweets and that kind of stuff. So when I was growing up, the people I watched going to work went to work in factories. That's what they did. Think about that as South African economy pre-1990, say. Think about then, if this is true, what's happened since then. Now, one of the things we're agreed about as South Africans is that our economy, even though it grew between the year 2001 and 2008, 2009, you'll hear people say that that was a jobless growth. In other words, GDP grew, but we didn't create more jobs for people. To understand that, you need to understand what makes up GDP. So GDP is a function of government spending, social spending, investment spending, as well as the difference between net imports and exports. That's kind of how you make up the GDP formula and equation. Now, South Africa built on a functional economy of extraction from stuff under the market or under the ground. Take the stuff out of the ground, put it on a truck, ship it and put it on a port in, I don't know, Richards Bay, and send it to somewhere in the world. That's how we built this country. That's effectively what the National Party did. That's why, if you think about it, who have been people who have created wealth or have amassed wealth since we've come into the new dispensation? Think about black people who have money, like real money. Typically, they're in mining. How many black entrepreneurs you know created an intellectual enterprise like a Facebook or Twitter or a bank, right? And that's not to say we're not intellectually capable. It is to say, when we created the instrument of BEE, the shifting of wealth from one group to another, we shifted instruments of wealth that were already in existence. Ergo, natural resources businesses, mines, etc., etc. 2 wealthiest black people in this country, what are they in? Mining, right? So that's the way this economy is built. Now, go back to my example. Township I come from, 3 industrial parks. People who grew up in my township, the older people who worked in those factories, all those older people had technical skills. They worked as artisans, boiler makers, they were plumbers, electricians, engineers, they fixed stuff. Some of them worked on the production line, right? But the point is, they worked in an industrial function where they could amass some sort of skill. Since this sort of new wave and new government, how many industrial parks do you think have been built around my township? Zero. What has happened is we've had about 5 malls go up around Wattville. You've had Lakeside Mall, East Rand Mall, Brakpan Mall. Guys, there's a mall in Brakpan. Guys, like, why do we need a mall in Brakpan? There's a mall in Brakpan, right? Lakeside Mall, East Rand Mall, Brakpan Mall. There used to be Benoni Plaza. There's now not Benoni Plaza anymore. There's a massive mall around that area. All that's happened is you've taken people who used to work in factories, have a skill, and in creating new economic growth, in effect what you've done is you've created consumption-led growth. So the reason why South Africa has had a jobless growth is actually very simple. It's because to grow GDP, all you have to do is have, in effect, companies reporting higher earnings. And most companies have not invested in more industrial capacity. All they did was they lay out more stores, gave out more credit to more consumers. So young people I went to school with, for instance, don't work in factories. They will work at a clothing retailer, packing shirts. Now, if you take 2 people, 2 young people in their 20s, the one works in a factory, in a production line, the other works in a retail store packing shirts, who do you think has a skill? Just think about it logically. Because if the factory closes down, the person working in the production line can go to another factory and apply that skill. If not, he could potentially start his own business and use that skill. The guy packing shirts, what's he going to do? So we created all these malls, and these malls have in effect driven sort of like the growth story of South Africa. This is similar to Greece, by the way, and this is the point I'm coming to. So study the Greek economy between 1999 and 2007, thereabout, just before the global market collapse, global capital market collapse. That economy grew between 3.4 and 6%. These are phenomenal growth rates. The market crashes in 2007, and immediately that economy goes into a flat growth story, similar to where we are now, 0 point something, and then into a deep recession, and as you know, has had to be bailed out by the Europeans. Yesterday, the World Bank released a forecast revising down South Africa's growth number once again from 1.1% to 0.6%. They're saying next year we'll do 1.1%. Mark today, mark my words. We will not do anything more than 0.9% next year. Why? Because we've not fundamentally addressed why our economy is not growing. The economy is not growing because we aren't building more productive capacities. There's not more factories going up. So the only way we've fueled economic growth is through consumption. The government has done it a little bit by spending on World Cups and stadiums and roads and freeways, and companies have benefited off the back of it, and as a result, we aren't really creating new production capacity. I mean, tell me one thing we've created since, I don't know, 1990, a new thing created in South Africa, patented here, that we export to the rest of the world. One. Don't worry, I'll wait. Do you see? Now, if you're not creating stuff that you can export to global markets, but you're talking about having a growth economy, where's the growth coming from? It means the growth is coming from you consuming your own goods. So if you want to understand why, you and I live in a country that has 55 million citizens, 40% of them unemployed by the broad definition, 28% by the narrow definition. If you want to understand why that is, that 3 out of 10 young people in South Africa today looking for work can't find work, the answer is actually very simple. It's because we've not created anything of value along which we can industrialize to create industrial capacity to export to the rest of the world. Why? And what can we learn from Greece? So there were 4 main things that led to the decline of the Greek economy. The first, levels of corruption. Now, this is not new. I can have a conversation with you that's long about levels of corruption. Everybody knows the corruption that's reported. But remember that in most economies, only what we call surface level corruption, high profile corruption, actually gets reported. And corruption, by the way, isn't the stuff you read in the media. Yeah, that's the most pervasive form of it. Corruption is you getting in your car, getting stopped by someone who's wearing a brown and orange attire, and you choose to give them a favorite choice of beverage. That's corruption. And that, by the way, is endemic. I work with entrepreneurs every single day as the CEO of my growth fund. And you'd be surprised how many entrepreneurs have to pay to get work. Here's how it works. I give you a 10 million rand contract, the person in supply chain says to the entrepreneur. I'll give you a 10 million rand contract, you give me 10% of that. The entrepreneur agrees because he's seeing 10 million rand value of the contract. But what's his gross margin? If he's lucky, let's say 40% gross margin. So of the 10%, he's making 4 million gross margin. What is his net margin? If he's really efficient, anything between 12.5% and 15%. So he's going to break out with 1.5 million rand net margin. By the way, this is net margin pre-tax. The law says you've got to pay 28% of your corporate income as tax. So when you take 28% out of 1.5 million, that's something like 375,000 rand. You're now only left with 1.2 million, 1.1 million. The entrepreneur took 1 million and paid it to the guy in supply chain. So how much is he actually left with? 100,000 rand in free cash flows. 10 million revenue, 100,000 free cash flows. That's why you have entrepreneurs and you have low growth economy. It's because even though he's doing work, the system under which he's working is fleecing him of the value he's creating. So levels of corruption is the first thing we learned from the Greek economy. I mean, that economy and the people working in that economy were ridiculously corrupt. The second, and I've kind of spoken about it, is this credit-fueled consumption, right? So it's the consumption to drive GDP growth, but the consumption itself is not production-fueled, it's credit-fueled. That's why, I mean, it's startling to me that today you can get credit to buy food. Are you joking? You understand what that means, right? Like, if you're buying food on credit, food by its very function is a consumption product. It's not a productive product, which means if I, quickly, let me just make this point. Credit, the best way to think about credit is using tomorrow's money today. All you do when you go to the bank and you ask them, lend me $1 million, is you're saying, I don't have it today, but I believe I can earn it over the next 12 months. So I'm going to NPV that $1 million into money today. You bank, give me the $1 million today, and over the next 12 months, I will pay it to you. But because you're lending me the money, I know you're going to make a margin, I'll pay you that margin that's called the interest rate. So credit, actually, is nothing more than using tomorrow's money to fund today. Now, when I was studying finance, I used to have a professor who used to say to me, debt isn't bad, debt is agnostic. Debt is just a thing. What you do with debt is the issue. So if you're taking debt to finance consumption, food, cars, watches, taboo, pop bottles, recognize that in effect what you're doing is you're using tomorrow's money to fund lifestyle today, and once you've consumed that money, it's gone. See, so poverty and you with that thinking, yeah, well, same WhatsApp group. So what you need to understand is you can't use tomorrow's money to finance consumption today. You should use debt if you're financing production. So if I lend $1 million, and from that $1 million I'm going to do something and earn 1.5 million in net, then I can use the debt. So the second thing is credit-fueled consumption. The third is you need to worry about our government debt. Now, most people, and I imagine most of you here watching this, don't even know what our current government debt is as a function of GDP, for instance. Most people don't know about government debt. Most people don't know why the government needs debt, and most people don't know why government debt is either good or bad, depending on its uses. South African government debt right now is sitting in just between 25 and 30%, thereabout. By the way, by global economic standards, if you look at us in the BRICS countries, we're right in the middle of the BRICS pack. But by global economic standards, that is just at the beginning of what we call the danger zone. So the recommended debt level for developing markets by global financiers that I've seen in the World Bank specifically is around 25%. We've breached it now. The danger zone is 50%. So we not only have breached it, but we're moving in the wrong direction. We're moving towards the 50%. So people say to me, why must I worry about my government debt and how much government debt the country has? Actually, very simple. I have an aunt who earns an income grant. Her single source of pride, by the way, is that at the end of the month, she doesn't have to phone me and ask me to help her with anything because she earns a government income grant, right? What happens when the government debt rises? And as you've seen, we just come from a quarter where SARS wasn't able to collect against their target. They missed it by 30 billion in an economy that's growing at 0%. So SARS, in my view, was probably likely to miss its own collections trajectory for the next 12 months. What that means is there is a shortfall in how you fund the fiscus. Two things happen. To fund the shortfall, the state goes to global markets, typically through a bond, raises a debt instrument called a bond, and raises money to finance something, consumption. Now, in future, the state has to pay back that debt. That's how all debt works. You've got to pay it back. Which means, perhaps not this year, but next year and the year after, the government has to get into a decision about, do they pay my aunt a higher income grant, or do they pay their debt? Or do they build schools? Or do they build highways? Or airports? Or bridges? You understand? This is hugely toxic. If you're a person that loves this country, you should worry about the levels of debt, certainly that are incurred by our government. And then the fourth one is the levels of unemployment in this country, and then the low levels of productivity. These are the four main things we share with the Greek economy. So what do I want you to take away from this video? Actually very simple. I leave for Qatar on Sunday, and from Qatar I'm going to be in the Nordic countries. I'm doing some work there, but a part of what I'm doing is I'm also meeting with investors in the Nordic countries. For those of you who follow me on social media, you would have seen that about a week ago I had a meeting just here in Joburg with the Deputy Minister of Economic Affairs and Development in Finland. Came to meet with me because we're looking to raise some capital from them. Here's what's fascinating. We're finding it easier to talk to investors in developed markets about lending and giving us capital to invest in entrepreneurs than we're finding it to do here. As a consumer, you know, it's easier for the bank to give you money to buy a car than a house. They'll give you 1.5 million rand to buy a car, which depreciates at, let's say, 30% per annum, depending on the mileage you put on it. But they won't give you 1.5 million to buy a house, which appreciates at, let's imagine, maybe 8% per annum. Why? Because the system of capital is wired to keep you in debt and keep you in consumption. The point I want to make is, it's not a government problem, it's not a consumer problem, it's actually a South African problem. The entire system of capital is designed to keep you in perpetual poverty, the whole system. That's why entrepreneurs can't get financing as and when they need it. That's why the venture capital cultures in this country is fairly poor on the one end. And that's why on the other end, you have an economy that is not diversified, doesn't have deep levels of industrialization, and is effectively been fueled by credit-led consumption. Big, big problem. So, what should you do? It's actually very simple. It's actually very simple what you got to do. The first is stay informed. Watch the levels of debt the government accumulates, and make sure that you make your voice heard about what those levels of debt are. You know me, I'm not a government guy, I'm not a politician. I'm just a person that loves my country and wants to see it work. So watch those debts. The second, and it's perhaps the most important, is support entrepreneurs, guys. Support them. Now, I was with a friend of mine, he and I went Dragon's Den together, you guys know him, Vinny, yesterday. And Vinny was telling me an interesting story, so I want to tell it to you. He says, Vinny lives in San Francisco, and he was having a conversation with a friend of his about Elon Musk. And the friend of his says, you know, I love Elon Musk so much, I'm going to support him. And how I'm going to support Elon Musk is I'm going to buy Tesla shares. Vinny said to him, don't buy Tesla shares. If you want to support Elon Musk, buy a Tesla. I says, but it's the same thing. No, it isn't. See, if I buy a share in Tesla or Anglo-American, that's trading what we call a secondary market. I take my money and I give it to another person that already owns the share. The underlying entrepreneur running the business doesn't get more money because he already sold the share to the first guy. Do you get it? It's the first guy who makes the profit, not the entrepreneur. You work in corporate right now. You make decisions right now about who your suppliers are, what you buy. Do you worry about whether or not you're supporting small suppliers or black suppliers? Are you worried about whether or not you're supporting small businesses and emerging businesses, or whether you're supporting the big businesses? You got to ask yourself these questions. It doesn't matter what you do. You could be in marketing, putting together events. You could be in engineering, looking for, I don't know, engineers and architects. You could be in finance, looking for the next group of people to help you run an SAP implementation. It doesn't matter. Are you looking at using entrepreneurial businesses to help you as a part of your service providers? Help the entrepreneur. That's what you need to do. And the only help you need to give the entrepreneur is by buying his goods and services. That's how we fix this country. So I wish you well, you know me. Always happy to get your thoughts on our musings. Thank you for watching this. This was like a big one, right? Like it's technical, it's a bit of economic language, some economic data, but the point sticks. Point is this: we can go Greece or not, all based on what you and I citizens choose to do. Support entrepreneurs. Cheers, guys.